Welcome back everyone. Hi, if you're new, I'm Tori, and today I'm going to share with you some of my biggest surprises of 2022. So I read a lot of good books this year. I've mentioned this already. This has been a really solid reading year for me, and in some cases, some books have just really exceeded my expectations. But there also have been books this year that have surprised me for a variety of different reasons, whether they have stuck with me all year in some way and I just wasn't expecting that, or books that I read that were just outside of my normal sci-fi and fantasy preferences that shocked me in some way. And then there's one book on here that is actually a recent read for me that I had no expectations for going in, and it blew my mind. So I have 6 books to share with you, and I hope you enjoy this video, so let's get into it. The first book making this list is Fina by Nino Cipri. I have mentioned this a million times already on this channel, but just in case anybody is new here, I do not typically like humor in my science fiction and fantasy books. It's just not really something that appeals to me. The tone of the book just always feels off to me, so I do like things a little bit more on the serious side, a little bit darker in some cases. So humor always kind of throws me off in books. I always mention this as well. It's not a character saying or doing something funny in a book that turns me off, or it's not like a funny scene happening in a book. It's when a book is specifically written to be funny, like it reads that way. So very obvious books that fit this that I am not the biggest fan of are books like The Martian and The Murderbot Diaries and other books like that. But there are exceptions, and Fina is, I think, one of the best exceptions. I think with this novella in particular though, the humor just really caught me off guard. I was just not anticipating it, and then I had an actual laugh out loud moment in this book, and after that I was like, well, I guess I'm enjoying this story now, and it kind of went from there. This novella is great. It takes place in this furniture store that is basically IKEA, but there are wormholes that open up in the stores and they lead to different dimensions, and it becomes this big like multiverse kind of situation. The story starts when this young girl approaches like the customer service desk, and she mentions that she can't find her grandmother. Her grandmother's gone missing somewhere in the store, and they immediately know that the grandmother has like gone through one of the wormholes to the like different dimensions. And so the employees of this store, they all sit down and they like watch this like information video about wormholes and different dimensions and this device called the Fina that will allow them to travel to these different places. And so in this, we're following 2 characters who just randomly get pulled into this because they're 2 of the employees in the store. And the hilarious thing about it is the company actually used to have a Fina division with these trained people and who are very well equipped to go out and go into these different dimensions and return what's been lost. But the company cut this division because of money trouble, or to save money, and so now it's up to these like low-paid employees who have no experience, and they're just sent out into this chaos essentially. I think this is such a fun, adventurous sci-fi novella, but also it's a really smart commentary about corporate and these low-paying wages and just the way that employees are treated in corporate settings. I really, really enjoyed this book. And the moment that made me laugh out loud when I was like, oh yeah, this is gonna be a really good read, caught me off guard, like I said, but it was the moment when they had just finished watching the tutorial basically about the wormholes and Fina and how to use the device and things like that. And the manager of the store, she's like asking the employee, she's like, well, do you have any questions? I'm paraphrasing horribly, but she's like, do you have any questions? Who's gonna volunteer for this? And one of the employees raises their hand and they're like, well, are we gonna get overtime for this? And the manager, she's like, no, but I can give you some coupons for the pasta place nearby. I am really glad I was not eating or drinking anything in that moment because I would have choked. And just from there, it's also a really heartfelt story as well, because the 2 characters who we're following, they were previously in a relationship, but they broke up like right before the novella starts. And so there's also that kind of tension between those 2 as they're traversing through these different worlds looking for this elderly woman. Go read this. And then next on this list is Lagoon by Nnedi Okorafor. I keep saying this, but I love Nnedi Okorafor's work so much. She is the kind of author that just makes me excited to not only be a reader but also a writer. Her work is so incredible and so varied, but she has very specific themes that, you know, that I can recognize in, you know, across all of her different books that I've read so far. She handles themes of loneliness really well, which I think we see in Remote Control, and isolation, and also coming of age, which I read in Who Fears Death. So I love her exploration of these different themes. I just love her work and her character driven stories. Lagoon surprised me because it is the complete opposite from what I expect of Nnedi Okorafor, and yet it still worked for me. Lagoon is an alien invasion, first contact story set in Lagos, and I promise you it is really unlike any first contact you have ever read before. This story moves at a breakneck pace. There are just so many different perspectives that we're circling throughout this story as the people of Lagos are reacting in different ways to this, you know, to this invasion, to this event. We do have like a core, kind of like a core group of characters who we start the book with, but otherwise we are just getting, I mean, a variety of all kind of different perspectives from all across the city, and it really is incredible. But it does move like at this whiplash pace, so you don't really have a chance to get connected to any one character. You don't really have a chance to go on any kind of character driven journey or explore like character motivations or things like that, though I think in the way that you would come to expect from Nnedi Okorafor. But I just had such a great time with Lagoon. This was so much fun, and I think it does show a really nice variety with Nnedi Okorafor's work, that she can tell this kind of slow burner, character focused story, but also come out of nowhere basically with this just fun action, just quickly moving, chaotic kind of story. And that is exactly what Lagoon is, and I enjoy this so much. And this is also one that has really stayed with me throughout the year. So this has just made me even more excited to pick up more of Nnedi Okorafor's work in 2023. I think the next book I want to pick up from her is either going to be Noor or Akata Witch. So I do have a couple of more books on my radar from her, but Nnedi Okorafor at this point is just one of my favorite authors, and Lagoon is an incredible read. The next book on this list is The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. This is very polarizing. This is, I think, a rare example of a time where something is that polarizing, and I came out of it like, you know, I really enjoyed that. The Cabin at the End of the World, before we get farther into this, The Cabin at the End of the World is very dark. It is very grim. It is very unsettling. I will just say this, if you are curious about it and you are someone who wants to go look up the content warnings, this is a very small cast of characters, and the book is set in one singular location. And so I think if you go check the warnings on this, it will actually spoil the entire book. In the book, we're following this family. We have two fathers and their daughter, and the book begins when the little girl is playing outside and she's approached by this stranger, and pretty soon more show up, and they basically force their way into this family's home, and they tell this family that they're gonna have to like commit this unspeakable act, and if they don't do it, the world will end. And that is all I'm gonna say about the plot, because it really just spirals from there. I think at its core, this is a completely psychological kind of book. It's so unsettling because of that, because you are just not sure if what these strangers are saying are actually true or not. And I mean, the whole time you're just like what is going on? Basically, what is real? What is happening in this book? I mentioned this before, but it really reminds me, just the whole premise of it and that whole psychological concept of like not knowing what's true, what's going on. It reminds me a lot of 10 Cloverfield Lane with John Goodman. So if you enjoyed that, I think you will like the premise of this book. Maybe not so much the like nitty gritty content in it, but the premise is definitely a little bit similar. And as the book goes on, you start cycling through the different strangers and of course the family, and getting more information about them and their backstories and histories and things like that. But even still, like through all that, you're just like, this is the weirdest thing I've ever read. So I really enjoyed Cabin at the End of the World for those reasons, because it really did mess with me in that kind of unsettling way of never being sure what's actually going on. But again, I keep reiterating this book is very dark. Be aware of that before going in. The next book making this list, you guys, is Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. I don't know what it is about Dead Silence, but this book is so good. It is so entertaining. It has really grown on me. I read Dead Silence several months ago now at this point, like actually I think towards the beginning of the year. It's been a while, and I remember when I finished this book, I liked it. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was entertaining, but I don't know what it is. All these months later, I'm just like, Dead Silence was it. Like that book was so good. This book, I'm telling you, if it just sounds even remotely interesting, just give it a chance and just go into it like a little, like a popcorn read. Just like have a good time with it. So so in this we have this crew, and they are, you know, traveling through space, and so they stumble upon this cruise liner that disappeared almost like 20 years ago. Everyone on the ship was just presumed dead. No one has heard of this ship for years. And so our main character and her crew, they stumble upon the ship, they get out, they go investigate, and things just get so weird and so creepy from there. But the thing is, the book is being told in two different timelines. The present day is actually the captain already has survived that whole exploring the ship. And so she is telling the story to these officials. And so she's telling the story in present day, and you know, at different parts in the story, it keeps flashing back to the past and to her crew on this ship and uncovering what's actually going on. And so the whole book, you're just like, well, what happened to the crew? Like, what's going on? How does she get out? I had such a great time with this book. When the climax came and all those answers started coming out, yeah, I recognized they were a little goofy, but I still really, really liked this book. The next book on this list is the recent read that I mentioned that just blew my mind, and that is The City in the City by China Miéville. This is a book that I had quite literally no expectations for. This has been on my TBR on my shelf for years. Finally, I'm just like, you know what? I need to start knocking off some of the older books on my TBR. And so I picked up The City in the City, not having any expectations, not even really knowing what the story was about. This book was so good. This book is so, I don't think trippy is not the right word at all, because it's not like trippy, mind-bendy in that kind of, like in a recursion kind of way. It's more like existential crisis in your like perception of reality almost. This book is a lot, but it is worth it. It is worth the read. At its core, the book is this like normal police procedural murder investigation. But China Miéville does something I have never seen before, where he takes this normal thing, this police procedural, and he just dumps this weird, dark, speculative fiction plot on top of it. And it really is unlike anything I've ever read before. So we have our main character, who is an inspector in this city called Beshel. And I had to look up how China Miéville pronounces these words, because these were not the pronunciations I had in my head reading this book. But we have our first city, Beshel. And our main character, Borlu, he is an inspector. And so he is called to the crime scene when this young woman is murdered, like on page 1. And as he starts digging a little bit into the mystery of what happened to her, it turns out that they are going to need the help of another city called Olcoma. And Beshel and Olcoma, they have, oh my God, I don't know how to explain this. They occupy the same geographical space. And so it's quite literally like if you take New York City and New York City's buildings and Statue of Liberty, and then you dump Paris right on top of it, and then you have like Statue of Liberty and Eiffel Tower right next to each other. That's the same thing that's going on with Beshel and Olcoma. And so you have citizens of these two different cities. But the thing is, they are taught not to see each other and see architecture and see the things that represent the other city. And it's so weird. And when you're reading it, you feel like you're kind of losing it a little bit. The inspector, he has to travel to Olcoma, and this is not spoilers in the synopsis, but he has to travel to Olcoma to unravel more of the mystery of what happened to this young woman. And it's literally him going right across the street. But at the same time, once he's there, it's like he has just traveled, to this completely foreign place, and he can't see his home city anymore, even though his house is right there. He's like trained not to see his house. I mean, it is trippy. It is really trippy, really, really weird. Again, I was not expecting anything like that. I've always wanted to read China Miéville. I've been saying this for years, and this was my first experience with him. But at the same time, it's like these two cities, they have this rich cultural history. They have these really detailed customs and ways of doing things. And I was not expecting any of that going into this book. This was just a huge surprise for me this year. Actually, I'm still going through like my best books of the year and getting the list in order of the top 10. I don't think The City in the City is going to be in the top 10, but it got pretty close. And just also the mystery of what's going on with this young woman and the things that she was involved in. Read this book. I am having trouble explaining it, but please read this book. And then the last book that is making the most surprising books of the year is The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan, which is the first book in Percy Jackson and the Olympians series. Percy Jackson is a series that I remember a couple of years ago I said I was not interested in reading. I feel like at this point in my life, there are some middle grade books that I think do work better when you read them as an adult. Like, they have a different impact when you read them as an adult. I think that's what I mean. And then there are some middle grade books where you, of course, you can read middle grade at any age, but there are some middle grade books that I think had the impact they were supposed to have when you were of the target demographic. And I was always under the impression that I just missed the boat with Percy Jackson. Percy Jackson came out when I was still pretty young, but at that time, I think when the first Percy Jackson book came out, either the 6th Harry Potter book or the 7th Harry Potter book was coming out. And so I was already wrapped up into that. I was already in love with A Series of Unfortunate Events. And then after HP ended, I moved right into my Twilight phase. And so now, being an adult, I always thought that Percy Jackson was just a series that I wish I had started when I was younger, so I would have that appreciation for it and have an appreciation for those characters, and I would enjoy it and basically grow up with Percy Jackson in the way that I've grown up with so many other characters that I was reading back when I was 11, 12, 13 years old. I really enjoyed The Lightning Thief, but I still stand by that. Like, I wish I had read that growing up, but even still, reading it now, it was still one of the most adventurous, one of the most fun books that I read in 2022. And I think I was pleasantly surprised that I did in fact enjoy this book as much as I did, because I wasn't expecting that. So this is the classic story of Percy Jackson, and we have all of the gods on Olympus. So you have these kids who are the children of these different gods. And I'm not going to get into Percy's dad, because actually that's something that I didn't know going into the story. So I still want to leave that as a surprise, just in case there's like, I don't know, 5 people out there like me who have never read Percy Jackson before. Like, this year I really fell in love with these characters. I love Annabeth. She's probably my favorite of this trio. I'm not the biggest fan of Grover. Like, he's fine, but I don't really miss him when he's not there. But Annabeth, she is just so smart, and she is witty, she's quick on her feet, loyal friend. She gets the job done, and I really liked her character. And then Percy, Percy has some little sassy one-liners that come and go here and there, and I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed his humor in certain situations and just his bravery overall. I only read the first 3 books, but this was such a great introduction to this world, and having gotten into it for the first time is just, it was a real treat. If you're still out there and have not read Percy Jackson, then I highly recommend that you get into it. It feels like a very special series. So that's it for me, you guys. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Let me know down in the comments what are some of your biggest surprises of 2022, whether they're positive surprises or surprises like in a more disappointing way, books that you thought you would love and you were surprised you didn't, that sort of thing. So I want to hear about it, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.